Hey YouTube, welcome back to another episode of Comics and Stuff. My name is Devin and I'm your host, and if you are a returning subscriber, I am so sorry that I missed the last 2 Mondays of posting, and if you are a new subscriber, forget that I said that. Unfortunately, I'm an adult and a parent and things happen and I have to go be responsible. So I did not get a chance to post the last couple Mondays and I am sorry. But, moving on, the subject for today's video is comic book grading general intro. So, I know that I've done a bunch of videos about different third-party comic book grading companies, but I've never actually sat down and made a video that talks about what comic book grading is. Somebody brought that up to me, so I just thought I'd make a video about it. Cool beans. So let's kind of start with like a general basic intro. So comic book grading is when you take a comic book and give it a number grade based off of its physical appearance. The highest grade a comic book can receive is a 10.0. That's gem mint, never touched by human hands, like it's perfect, there's nothing wrong with it. That is the highest grade a comic book can ever receive. And the lowest grade that a comic book can receive is 0.5 or NG, which means no grade, kind of depending on the situation. So each comic book will always start off at a 10.0 gem mint, and then once it's evaluated for its physical attributes and, see, well, there's a spine crease here, there's a color break here, somebody ripped or cut out this coupon and it affects the story. So every single time something like that is found, a point is knocked off from that 10.0 grade until it's brought down to its final grade. Plain and simple. So, you'll find things like, if you like for no grade, that will be things such as single pages of a extremely rare comic book. So like the very first page of Batman #1, which is the first appearance of the Joker from like 1940, has the Joker on it and everything. It's just one page. That's an NG or no grade, even though it's not like a full comic book, it's a page of a comic book, but it can't be evaluated as a comic book, so it gets the no grade. But you can have something like a Batman #1 with like 2 pages ripped out, but it's still, the rest of the comic book's still there. Well, that will receive like a 0.5 because the story's incomplete and it's, probably in pretty bad shape. But then you can get things like 10.0, it's just immaculate, there's not a single crease anywhere, smooth to the touch. You should probably wear gloves when you're handling it so you don't get fingerprints on it. Like 10.0s are like the bee's knees in the comic book like grading world as far as condition goes. Me personally, I am a budget collector. I'm not a rich guy. I can't afford those $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 books that are 9.8s and 9.9s, 10.0s, whatever. So I generally try to stick between 3 and 5, just because they're still nice to look at, but they're not like in mint condition, but they're still good and they still have readability and collectability. So that's just me personally. But anyways, let's kind of talk about the scale. So the scale was started by, it was a general scale used by the comic books community, but the one who solidified it was Stephen Fischler. He was one of the guys who helped open up Comic Connect, and since then it's kind of, the way that he did it has kind of been like adopted by the rest of the comics community as the general standard scale. Now, if you look at different like comic book grading companies, comic book grading sites, the Overstreet Price Guide, each one has like its own little variation on it, but that's okay. I mean, this is just like a standard. So again, it goes from no grade to poor, fair, good, very good, near mint or fine, very fine, mint, near mint, gem mint. I'm gonna put an annotation with the scale right here, and it'll be explained. So you'll get it, and I'll keep it here for a while. But anyway, so that is the general grading scale that we use. Now, you're probably wondering about like slabs. So slabs are the big hunks of plastic. I'm going to put a picture up here, but I'm also going to hold up a CGC slab right next to my head just to give you guys like a size like ratio. CGC is the general standard comic book grading company that everybody can think of off the top of their heads. There's other ones as well, but this is like the first. So they're like the household name. You can see it's not too crazy big. I mean, compared to the comic book itself, it just gives you a little border on each end, except for the area where the label is at. I mean, the slabs are pretty well put together. CGC has come out with some new slabs that apparently have a lot of controversy. So I'm not going to get into that. That's not for this video. But this is a slab. I mean, then you can get into things like there's other grading companies like PGX, which is just a little smaller. And then you also have the new kid on the block, CBCS. So there's also like international grading companies, but we'll get into those later. There's also grading companies that you should avoid, and I'll put an annotation at the end of the video or something. Anyways, though, so what is the slab? How does it work? How is it constructed? Well, the first thing is there's something called microchamber paper. Now, I don't think that they do this for modern day comic books. I do know that they do this for older books just because of the way that they're made. But microchamber paper is a special type of paper. I believe it has like copper in it or something. But essentially what it does is it stops your comic book from oxidizing. So if you've ever seen an old comic book and you open it up and the pages are kind of yellow, it kind of gives off that really old smell, maybe a little stinky to some people. Some people love it. I kind of like it, but it's me, so whatever. But anyways, so that's called oxidization. So oxidization is when your comic book has been exposed to air for so long that the acids in the paper, the ink in the paper start to let out like their carbon, their their acids, all their chemicals. That is my 4-year-old yelling, so I apologize. Anyhow, though, I lost my train of thought. So yes, so that is microchamber paper. They generally will slide one sheet in the front and one sheet in the back, and each one is good for like about 10 to 15 pages, depending on how potent it is. So that is your first line of defense when protecting your comic book when you're getting it graded. So the whole point of getting a comic book graded, obviously, is to protect the condition it's in and not let it get any worse. Another thing is that, as pages age in comic books, they get more brittle, easily rip, easily break. So this stuff kind of helps keep your pages supple, so they are easier to turn. You don't have to risk tearing stuff. But anyways, yeah, that's your first line of defense. Second line of defense is the Mylar sleeve. So there is a thicker, like I think it's 2 to 4 millimeters thick. It's a Mylar sleeve. It has just a lot of it's airtight. It's sealed completely on all 4 ends around your book. You can't actually really see it unless you look really close in most slabs. The CGC one in these older cases are a little more obvious, but then if you look at the ones in PGX, they're not very obvious at all. And then the ones with like CBCS, you can kind of see them, but whatever. So the Mylar sleeves will do 2 things. One, they will protect against the elements, basically. So water, they're airtight, so water, dust, like if you have a lot of like, I don't know, whatever, just things happening in your house, that's what it'll protect from. Now, the thing it doesn't protect against is like physical damage. So even if it's in the Mylar sleeve, you can still bend a comic book in half. So that's where the slab comes in. So the slab does 3 things. So one, it is kind of like your final line of defense against like falling, or if something falls on it, if you drop it, if you spill something, it actually kind of gives it a little, it kind of raises it off a little bit off the surface it's on. So it kind of protects against, like, if it's flat on the surface and you spill some water, it won't actually get on the book. But its most important function, at least to me, is protecting your comic books from getting bent, broken, falling, XYZ. So the slab also protects the label. So the label is one of the important things about the slab. That is where you will find like the actual number grade for the comic book, the pertinent information, the who did the story, the serial number, who did the art, XYZ, when it was graded. Excuse me. So that is the slab. So you got 3 lines of defense with the slab. Now, what about, like, you want to ask, what about sunlight? Well, sunlight is an interesting subject. So I'm sure you guys have seen sun-bleached comic books, and it's not a pretty sight. I do know that most of these slabs come with like a minuscule amount of UV protection. If you really want to protect your comic books, A, don't leave them out in the sun, you dummy, okay? And B, you can always look at Slab Pro. So Slab Pro is a company that makes accessories for slabs. So they will do things like they'll have rubber frames, so they give you like double protection against like dropping or falls or anything like that. It'll help kind of keep the slab from cracking. If the slab ever does crack, you can send the slab in for something called a reholder, where it's like half the price of grading, and they just like kind of redo it for you, which is cool. And then there's also the Slab Pro UV protective screen. So you can actually take a screen, and like a sticky screen, and put it on the front of your slab, and that'll protect it. Like double up protection on UV rays. So that's pretty cool. But again, I don't recommend ever just keeping your comics out in the sun indefinitely. If you are planning on displaying them like I do here, rotate them. So I generally will only keep my books out for like a week, maybe a week and a half at most, and then I'll rotate them out. You don't want them to have exposed sunlight for way too long. That can cause long-term damage, and you can take a comic book worth $1,000 and make it only worth like $200. So be smart and be careful with that. Anyways, though, so that's like a general intro of what comic book grading is. You have your scale. Once it's given a number grade, you got the microchamber. Once it gets a microchamber, you put it in the sleeve, the mylar sleeve. Once you put it in the mylar sleeve, you encapsulate it, and then you can buy extra accessories to keep your comic books protected. Now, what is the point of grading? Well, the point of grading is once you get a comic book graded like this, and it has that number grade, this now is guaranteed to be that grade. So this is my Marvel Premiere 47, first appearance of Scott Lang as Ant-Man. And it has an 8.5, which is a very fine plus. So, I mean, this can now not go down in its grade, basically. You know, the only way that it would go down in grade is if I physically broke open the case, took it out, and damaged it, and then had it regraded. But that's the point of these, is to protect the current condition of the comic book. It also kind of stands as a symbol of monetary value. So, you know, for example, this right here, my Mystery in Space number 53, this could be, you know, as it sits, it's around $350, but and it's a 4.5. So now if this was like a 2.5, not as many collectors would want it, if that makes sense. So generally people try to get higher grades, just because, you know, the nicer condition of the comic book, I mean, that's just how collecting works. And if you're watching this channel, I'm assuming that you know how collecting works. Me personally, like I think I mentioned it a couple times before, I'm a budget collector. I'm not a rich guy. I don't have thousands of dollars to invest in, you know, like a 9 point, like if this in like a 9.0 would be, you know, a few $1,000. I don't have the money to buy a few $1,000 9.0. So I personally prefer to keep my books between a 3.0 and a 5.0. That's just me. If you have the money to do it, you know, by all means, man, shoot. Anyways, though, so that's really all I really have to say about like a general intro to third-party comic book grading. That's what it is. That's the point. The point is to protect their condition. It's either for future investment purposes, if you're going to sell them for money, or if you just want to keep them in, you know, good condition for yourself, or if you want to give it as a gift. One thing that I will recommend is every 10 years or so, maybe a little less, maybe like every 8 years, you should get your comic books reholdered, which is getting them reevaluated and slabbed again, just because the microchamber paper needs to be replaced, and you don't want your books to oxidize in the slab. That can happen. It just takes a lot longer. But yeah, so I mean, that's the only thing. That's the only other thing I can recommend is every 10 years, get them redone. But anyways, though, so if you're curious about seeing my actual like grading videos, you can do things like click on these annotations right here. Okay, so I have one video basically on every single grading company. So you got CGC, PGX, CBCS. I'm probably not pointing at the right things, but you know, whatever. Then we got international grading, and then we have comic book grading companies to avoid. So there are grading companies to avoid. They will treat your collectibles like trash, and I do not like them, appreciate them, or approve of them. And then there's also like, what do I do if I live in France and I want to get a comic book graded? I can't send it all the way to America for a CGC. Well, you're in luck. There are other comic book grading companies out there. But anyways, that's really it, guys. If you have any questions that I didn't answer, please make sure you just put it in the description or in the comment section below. I apologize if I stuttered a lot or if you heard my 4-year-old screaming like I did, because that was unpleasant. But if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button. So that's going to show up right here. I always tell you guys that I have a weekly blog that I do on my website, but to be honest, I haven't done it just because I haven't had much to write about. So I'm trying to figure out what I should do with my weekly blog. If you have any ideas, shoot me a message. But if you still want to see my website and see my Comic-Con schedule, hit the link above. But that's it for this episode of Comics and Stuff, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for sitting and letting me rant for like the last 15 minutes. Yeah, I guess I'll see you Monday.